Spiritual discipline is not about blame or shame. It is about loving yourself in a way that honors the divinity within you. It is a continuously moving process and journey that you walk on. It is not an on and off switch, rather a habit that you build consistently over time. And when there are moments that you are not able to have the kind of discipline that you're looking to have, those are data points along the plot of your journey that you can look at and say, okay, what is the need here that I am meeting by doing this other behavior? And then how can I acknowledge that need and address it in a way that then aligns deeper into this certain way of life that I'm devoted to embodying? I teach a weekly women's circle on Wednesdays. Weekly women's circle on Wednesday with Wisty. Boom, say that 6 times fast. Anyway, and we work through the elements of the zodiac, each constellation, one energy at a time throughout the weeks as we work together. And this week we are stepping into the energies of Virgo, and to honor the energy of the organizer, the planner, the doer, I connected with all of my the goddesses in my group, and I asked them, like, what is the thing that you guys are really needing support with? And it was really one of those wonderful, like, synchronistic moments where the universe says, this is what the people need to know. And so I think in the collective, what a lot of us are struggling with right now is dedication, diligence, right? Like, we have this vision of our higher self, our highest timeline, and what that looks like, and the kind of calling that we're being pulled to offer into the world, right? Like, so many people are unleashing their offerings and putting their gifts out there and really being like, okay, like, I'm gonna step into my power and step into my light and share my voice. But you know, that requires a whole different lifestyle. It requires like a little bit more dedication to your rituals and to your inner work and to your schedule, and trying to balance like being a normal human being with like spiritual hygiene and like energetic wellness and like spiritual growth and all of those things. It's the reason why in the past, you know, deeply spiritual people were monks in the mountain, because like you want to just be able to go all the way in and really, really hone in. But what we're looking at is building spiritual lives in our day-to-day, right? And seeing business and creation and content, or even like being a barista, like whatever it is that you're doing, as an act of enacting your divinity and your will into the world. And that it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. That is you living on your highest timeline. And so I wanted to make this video to talk to that point and to that kind of pain that we're struggling with of creating consistency in our lives. And so I think it's really important, and a big shift that I had to learn that really changed my life was like, I used to think that like you had to be disciplined, right? You had to have like structure, and you had to do it in this one very specific way. And like if you didn't wake up at 6 a.m. and like immediately take a cold plunge, like you were not going to be able to be successful. And that's kind of extreme, but you get the general idea that we have these ideas of like, oh, in order to be healthy, I have to be rigid. And if I don't hit these metrics, like I'm not going to be living in alignment or whatever. And I think that that's not true. I think that's a very like kind of wounded masculine way of looking at things, because it says like it's so controlling, right? Like you're trying to control the flow instead of allowing the flow of your own spirit to move through you. And so that's not to say that you should just like be super fluid and like not have any plan. In fact, it's like somewhere in the middle, you know, if you're studying a ritual and the ritual says it has to be done at sunrise, like sometimes there's only one right way to do things. And that's where discipline, if you want to use that word, which we'll get into the etymology of that word and why I kind of am like, I don't know about that in just a second, because I want to be able to be diligent. I want to be able to be consistent. I want to be committed, all of those sort of things. And what I learned is that when I was doing it from a place of shame, saying like, if I don't do it this way, I'm not good enough, I didn't grow. It was a burden. I got burnt out. I felt like I could never, like I was never going to get anywhere. I was never going to accomplish the things that I've dreamed of because like I was a failure, you know, and I was like saying it to myself in this way of like, oh, well, like if you could just hit these metrics, if you could just be disciplined, diligent enough to do the thing, then like you'd get everything that you want, but you can't because you can't do this, right? That's so mean. Imagine talking to your friend like that. If somebody talked to my friend like that, I'd be like, oh, no. And so what I had to learn was to look at the things that were making me act out of alignment, if you will, from a non-biased perspective, and look at them as like points of saying like, this is like the trigger that causes this behavior. So how can I address that trigger and be aware of that trigger in a different way? There's like this misconception about meditation that it's like you have to stop thinking, that the whole point of meditating is to like be super focused and silent and like, you know, like in the zone. But that's not really what it is. Like the whole point of meditation is to be aware, right? So like you right now listening to what I'm saying is a meditation because you're processing and you're hearing what it is that I have to say, right? Like you being present in your current reality, you having like the sensory experience of whatever room you're in, of whatever activity you're doing, of the scent of the fabric on you, all of that is the meditation. It's having awareness and being present. So that's not to say that like you have to suppress your anxiety or you have to always be on all the time. Instead, it's to say like, okay, if I'm looking to live in alignment with my divinity, that means that I need to come at my life from a place of awareness. So when I'm doing the thing that makes me feel like I'm checking out, like for me, like my thing that I really am working on, like building diligence and dedication and consistency around, because I think it's gonna like shift everything else, is like I think I spend too much time on my phone, like scrolling scrolling on my phone. I know that like if I were to have more long form content and like not just scroll through things and read more, like that my consciousness will grow even further. And so it's like building up this habit, because when you scroll on your phone, you're like checking out, you know? It's like kind of this, it's this numbing thing. And I'm not saying that like you should never scroll on your phone, but you have to know your own limits and like have your own boundaries, right? That's where the discipline comes in, because you say like, well, I want to create the space for my consciousness to do its thing. Like I don't always want to have like other people like in my head telling me like what I should think and how I should think and what direction I should go. Like I need to create the space and protect my own energy enough to have this period of silence. And that takes habit building when like you've been on your phone since you were in middle school, you know? And so all of this to say that when you go and you assess like, okay, so I use my phone as a tool to kind of decompress. Then I can say, all right, well, that means that my body and my mind and my soul need me to decompress. So how can I do something that gives me the same kind of like ease of thought? Because I'm a thinker, you know, I'm always thinking. So that's why the input is helpful, is because then I'm like, I don't have to like be thinking. Instead, it's like I'm ingesting. And so it's like, how can I shift that into a way that I feel like actually benefits me instead of kind of doesn't, like when I know that it doesn't. And so that's kind of the whole point of building up discipline, is like you say, all right, I want to have a more spiritually aligned life. You have to protect the space in your life for that to happen. And so that's why discipline is like kind of like a more, let's get into the etymology of the word discipline, because I think it's important. It comes from the Latin word for student, and you can see its root in things like disciple as well, which is interesting because when we look at the word like discipline, then it kind of gives it this like medieval Christian theme to it, which is very like kind of that colonized perspective that has led us to this place of overexerting ourselves and of not honoring our energy in the first place. And so that's why it's really important to look at the words that you're using, because they're spells. And so if the word has all of this energy, all of this history that's been put into it, right? Like when people use the word discipline to justify punishment. And while I do believe in consequence, I don't believe in harsh punishment in the way that I've experienced it sometimes in my life and seen other people like with it, right? Because you don't actually learn something from that sort of retaliated, like reactionary behavior. Instead, it creates like fear and disconnection and the burden of feeling like I'm not good enough. And there's nothing that I can do because I've been punished to this point, and like I'll never succeed because I'm a failure, right? And that's why I don't like the word discipline, because it gives you that like harsh edge of like, if you don't do this, you failed. But it's not like that. It's like, if you fall off of a horse, you have to get back on it, right? And like, it's this whole idea. I heard somebody who was like a pro athlete say, like, you're one good decision away from being back on track. You know, it's not that you have to make 100 good choices to make up for the one mishap that you had. Instead, you have to, like, you say, oh, like, I'm getting out of track, like, I'm doing the thing that I don't really want to be doing, like, how can I center back in to what it is that I need to be doing, what it is that I know that's good for me, right? Like, that's where the dedication comes in. That's where the consistency comes in. So it's not about doing the thing right every single time. It's about having the goal and saying, this is where I'm going to get to. And eventually you'll have built up the habit that it's second nature and you do it every time. But when you're at the point of shifting from unconscious behaviors, like a big thing that I overcame was like, I when I was traveling, I traveled like full time out of my van for 3 years. And it was obviously way easier to eat fast food then, but fast food is fucking horrible for you. And so I had to, like, it felt like it was an addiction. I felt like I had to, like, build the strength to not eat that way and to, like, create new food habits and all those sorts of things. And it was hard. It took me, like, I think it was, like, a whole year of, like, consistently making the shifts and being able to listen to my body, because it's like a physical craving, right? Like, it's a physical experience, and then your brain is like, oh, well, this is what I need in order to quell that, so this is how we're going to go there. And then you have to say, here's what you're actually looking for, here's what you actually need, let me give you that, right? So like a good example is like emotional eating, right? You're overwhelmed, you're looking for something to help you regulate your nervous system, and like you learned from whoever or from however that like food is how you're going to fix that. Well, when you're doing that, like you can then become aware. You can say, oh, like this is why I'm eating in the way that I'm eating. And then like you kind of sit with that behavior, and then you say, I see you, I acknowledge you and this old habit and this pattern that I've done, and like thank you for providing me comfort for as long as you have, but I want to find a new way to do this. So I'm gonna set this down and I'm gonna walk away and I'm gonna go hug myself and take some deep fucking breaths instead. You know, so it's this consistent process of allowing yourself to ebb and flow, and to not beat yourself up for doing the things that you didn't want to do, but also having the strength and consistency to say, but there's a reason why I want to do it this way instead, and it's worth it. And so I'm gonna do it. I'm even when it's uncomfortable, even when I don't want to, even when I have a bunch of resistance, I'm going to try anyway, because that's how we continue to grow and expand and stretch. And the whole point of like a spiritual journey, one thing that I do like about the etymology of the word discipline is that it kind of meant like training for godliness. In like that more like Christian context, when I was looking into and doing the research of the word, like it had this energy of like training for the divine. And I do think that's true, but in a much more personal way. Like it's not because I have to become worthy or unworthy of some external source. Rather, it's because I have greatness in me, and that is my divinity. And that is the spark of the divine that is within me, that is looking to be put out into this world. And so like I'm training to hold all of that power so that it can come through, right? Like I have all of these ideas, all of these gifts, so do you, and you're training so that you're able to receive what it is that you're calling in, right? Like manifestation is not about creating the object of your desire. It's about creating the capacity to receive that which you desire. And so that's where dedication, diligence, consistency all come into play. I think it's also important to touch on the reason why it's called a spiritual practice or a magical practice, or like doctors have a practice even, you know, because like honing your psychic gifts or becoming a conscious creator is the same thing as like learning to be an athlete or a musician or a painter or a poet or a coder, like anything, like anything that requires knowledge and wisdom requires trial and error. And so when you mess up, quote unquote, you didn't fail, you just received the feedback and the knowledge of where it is that you still have to grow and where it is that you still have to learn. And that is the thing that keeps us moving. I think like secretly we're all sort of driven by our own dysfunction, and that's a beautiful thing, you know, like obviously we're here to become awesome people, and it's great to put your best foot forward and to live up to that highest potential that you have within you. And it's also okay to know that like it's impossible to not make mistakes, and that the mistakes are just as sacred as the victories, because they are just as momentous occasions where you learn what does and doesn't work. And so this is really just driving home that spiritual discipline is not about shame. It's not about like reprimanding yourself for not doing something. It's about being aware of what you're doing and then consciously making the choice to do it anyway, right? Like you can consciously choose to do the thing that's not great for you, right? Like if you know that drinking is not good for you because you're poisoning yourself for pleasure and you choose to drink anyway, like that's your choice. That's a choice that you're making, right? And like the person who has to reckon with that is you. And so it is when we choose to grow from a place of love that says, I deserve pleasure, I deserve joy, I deserve happiness. I don't have to poison myself in order to feel those feelings. I can go find it organically. I can connect with people in a way that actually honors that within me instead of like numbing myself or tuning myself out of it. It's a big thing, you know, it's a big deal. It's difficult. It's also something that's done easiest in community, like when we hold each other accountable and when we can speak to the radiance in one another and help uplift each other. It really helps in growing actual consistency and actual habits, because when you're doing it in like an echo chamber, I was recently told by one of my friends about this idea of like the metaphor of the bamboo seed, where like for the first couple of years, like you water the bamboo seed every single day and you never see it because it's growing a complex root network. And then like you're years down the line, and then you keep watering it, and then it sprouts, and then it shoots up 90 feet in a short period of time because it had that root system. And so what diligence, consistency, and practice does is it creates the roots for you to be able to sustain the kind of quantum shift in your life that you're calling in by tapping into your power and being a conscious creator, right? Like if you're looking to shift out of your 9-to-5 and like go into a creative field, like it's gonna happen. You're on the path. What you need to have is practices and consistency and ways of thinking and habits that are going to support the kind of rapid growth that you're looking for. And so that's why it's so important to build routine and habit into specifically around like your mornings and your evenings, because the spice of life is going to come in through the middle of the day, you know, and it's supposed to, and that's a good thing. So if you have this kind of like routine in the morning and routine in the evening, it really helps you to come back to self and come back to your own point and honor like the fullness of what it is that you're really creating and what it is that you're experiencing and what's being reflected back at you by the people in your community. So instead of being controlling and trying to schedule out every hour of your life, which I am totally guilty of this. Like, this is the point in time where I'm encouraging you to make a shift and try it out this way instead. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to start small, right? Something that you can do every single day. Instead of trying to control the entire outcome of like what your whole new life is going to look like when you shift into that like place of creator, I want you to start with 1 or 2 like specific points in your daily life that you honor as moments of the divine. And in my classes, I teach about mirror work, and I teach about body grounding and our relationship to our food as part of the first month, because I really believe that this is how we do that. Because we see our reflections on accident, we see our reflections on purpose throughout the day. And that's a moment where you can always honor the divine in you. So one of the ways to create spiritual practices and consistency is to have a ritual that you do. So it's like when you look at yourself in the mirror, you can just like honor your light, you know, say like, I see you, like, in me, like, higher self, you know? Or you can, like, say that affirmation of what it is that you're embodying and bringing into your life. Or, you know, if that's not really your style, then every time that you eat, you can take a moment to really feel into the, like, life force energy of the food and just give gratitude and thanks for all of the people who touched it, all of the sun and the moon and the animals and the rain and everything that had this journey of like bringing it to you, you know, the people who paved the roads for the trucks to drive on, for the food to get to your house. Like we're such a complex web. And so building in that spiritual practice is like acknowledging like you're supported and nourished by that web, and you also get to give back to it. And so some other moments that I like to use as like moments of spiritual practice is like the first time that I connect with my phone. Because like I said, like I'm really working through like the relationship to technology and all of those sorts of things. And so for me, like I want this to be like a portal that helps me connect into the people who need what I have to say, and like the people who I need to hear what they have to say. So like when I wake up and I do check my phone, you know, like I just have a moment of honoring all of the people that it connects me to, and honoring like the wisdom that it gives me and the answers that it holds and all of these sorts of things, instead of just kind of like, you know, going into that mindless mode that it sort of encourages, which then it makes it so cool, because then you're like flipping the whole thing on its head of like sometimes like the algorithm like kind of sucks in your attention, and instead you're saying like, thank you for like nourishing my attention when I put my energy into this with people who are connected to me in ways and things that actually like benefit me. And I find that the more that I like, we all know that our phones are like listening. We don't know how, but we can confirm, you know? And so like when I'm honoring like my phone in that sacred way, that's another practice that I'm building up. And so all of this to say like pick one small habit, one small moment, one small like touch point, right? Like a little moment where you come back to yourself, where you come back to yourself, where you come back to yourself. Maybe it's the mirror, maybe it's when you eat or drink water, maybe it's when you touch your phone. And then have that be a moment where you anchor in like, I am a creator, and I am present, and I am conscious, and I'm aware of the choices that I'm making. Because then when there's those moments where you go into sleeper mode, where you go into like unconscious, just like habit mode, you've already started to create the spaces in your mind that are going to say, oh, come back to self. Oh, come back to self. Be intentional. What do I really want? What do I want to give? What do I want to do? How can I honor myself in this moment? How can I honor my world? How can I honor my community? Because ultimately, like, our spiritual journeys are us growing so that we can contribute to the whole. And that's why it matters to be consistent, because something inside of you is needed, is necessary. The same pattern, force, life force, energy, whatever it is that created the rivers and the trees and the sun and the sky created you, and said that your perspective was what it needed in order to grow into the best version of itself. Honor that. I honor that in you. Thank you so much for being here. I look forward to connecting and chatting, and let me know how this resonates with you and what habits you're looking to build. I'll see you soon. Bye.